How's it going, everybody? Kind of a unfortunate situation we got to talk about today in regards to a long-standing world championship coach on the team of NRG. If you guys haven't seen the news, we're going to talk about this in about 4 different parts. First part is going to be the origination of how this all came to be earlier last week. We're then going to talk about the coach, Sizz, in this circumstance, talking about his reflection on it, his thoughts, basically how it came to be, what he did, provide some backstory and everything. And then from there, kind of the next steps and my overall thoughts about it. So this one is kind of a somber feeling about the situation, but I think there is some silver lining towards the tail end because of the type of person that Sizz is and the efforts that are going to come through. And one of those where initially it may seem like it sucks, but it's going to be a blessing, I think, for not only Sizz, but also everybody else in the future, based upon, I guess, my own personal takes on what I've seen through Sizz in his career. So initially, for those that don't know, on October 13th, Shift, as always, Shift knows, ends up putting out a tweet and a article basically stating that NRG is going to be moving forward from Sizz. And this is pretty crazy because Sizz is now celebrating, or just celebrated, his 3rd year with NRG as a coach. And right around the same time that he is no longer going to be a coach, and they're going to be using their current sub, Epic Johnny. For those that don't know, before the current RLCS season started, Musty was no longer listed as a sub, and Epic Johnny, who has played for a multitude of different teams. I think the most recent team he was on, he was a sub for Power back when they had an NA roster with Forky, and is now on a team, but the team doesn't even have a full completed roster. So I don't know what that situation is. So Musty is out, Epic Johnny is in. Shortly after, we get the report from Shift stating that Sizz is also on his way out, and that Epic Johnny, their substitute, will be taking over as coach. On the 16th of October, just a couple days ago, Sizz did put out a video confirming that said situation and provides a little bit of context. And we're going to break that down in a couple different parts. The first part is talking about what the video kind of entails, the steps that Sizz takes, and kind of spark notes it or make it a really quick summarization for you all, and try to provide some context and some insight to the back ends of how these things might particularly come to be. Luckily, Sizz does detail a lot of that specific information for us all, which I think is important. And then once we get through those steps, kind of the future for Sizz, as well as my own thoughts about the process. Again, if you guys want links to anything I'm talking about or anything as I'm discussing, they are in the description down below. So the video starts off, and Sizz expresses that he doesn't want anything to be taken the wrong way. Very level-headed in this. I'm glad he took some time to kind of reflect on the situation before making the video, and it doesn't come from an emotional place. It's a very logical and well thought out situation. So again, a lot of maturity from Sizz and the mental side of things, because a lot of people do take kind of the immediate approach and it gets ugly very quickly, which again, not the case for Sizz. Very level-headed, very well thought out about how he's doing this. Affirms that, there's 2 sides to every single story, so doesn't want any hate or misinformation or anything of that spread. Doesn't want anybody to be attacking the players or the coaches or anybody, NRG staff or the organization. He still loves both the players as well as the staff at NRG dearly, and the organization. It starts off and he talks about the history of NRG, his involvement of a coach, what his role is, how the decision came to be, and then kind of like his future steps. Starting with his involvement, for those that aren't familiar, Sizz did join NRG in Season 8. It was actually the very first season that coaches were allowed to be on stage. For those that are unfamiliar with the RLCS, coaches have never really been allowed to be behind players on stage and providing help and insight. Technically, for the longest time, coaches weren't actually allowed to be in comms with their teams, even in online events, even though there was no way to prove that they were or weren't. If the players are using TeamSpeak because of low latency, the coaches could also easily be in there and watching like a stream with a potential that's still a big issue. We don't need to go into that, but coaches weren't officially allowed to be on stage supporting the players until they trialed it at a DreamHack previously in that season, and then they made it official for the World Championships in 2019. So long time overdue, and you saw the immediate impact of coaches on stage. Players weren't getting tilted out. The only time that you saw blowout matches was not due to mentality. It was mostly due to this team is significantly better. They're popping off. You're seeing major regions versus minor regions or expansion regions that are getting beat because these teams are better. So you saw a lot closer games, and a lot of credit for that was due to coaches like Sizz being able to be on stage, support, and help mentally with these teams. That was the start of Season 8. Turbo came over. It was Turbo, Garrett, and Justin. They won a world championship. The first season, everything goes well. And then season 9 didn't go too great. There were some issues that Sizz mentions that were among the team with Turbo. If I remember correctly, and again, don't quote me on this, but it was due to COVID coming along for a lot of people, and a lot of players suffered with motivation to really want to play. When you are going to every single LAN and you're competing every major live event, and you take that one thing away, we're basically just playing glorified scrims every week for a ton of money. And for a lot of competitors, it's not about the money. They don't even think about that. It's about being able to pridefully show that we're the best in the world. So don't quote me on that, but that's what I think was a majority reason from what previous reasons were in the past, from what we've seen kind of sprinkled throughout. And not trying to push any strong narrative, but from the context that I remember, that was it. They then replaced Turbo going into Season X, where they brought in Squishy. They won Region X or Regional X or Season X, whatever you want to call it, where everything was online again. That was when I did the brawls in the offseason. I think they made their major debut with Dazarin's tournament. Wave Dash, I think is what it was called, where they just clapped. They played so well, and everybody's like, crap, this team's going to be incredible. Squishy takes more of a defensive approach and starts air dribbling on a defense and making teams impossible to beat. Like, they looked really, really good for a reason. They kept that same roster through the most recent season, which was 21-22. Started extremely well. Fall split, they got second at the major, losing to BDS. And then you started to see subtle declines over results starting to get worse and worse. Despite this, they still play fairly well at the World Championship, where they, if I remember correctly, were, 9-12? They were just outside of the top 8. And so much Rocket League's going on, it's hard to remember all this. No, they made top 8. So even despite the slow and steady decline, they still make top 8 before they lose to the second place team in G2 in the quarterfinals. So even though there was decline, NRG is like a pretty solid team and is a notable team that is making it through a lot of different rosters. You're talking your top 8 in the world out of 24 that went to the World Championship. Season 22-23 starts. Similar things. They are in North America. We've only seen one regional. They are a top 8 team. Their loss coming to Furia that kept them out of top 8. And it went to 5, and it was a 1-goal game in the end. Very close series. Could have just as been likely that NRG is making top 8, and they are still in part of the conversation. So, again, it's not that NRG is abysmal. It's just when you associate them with top 2, top 3 in North America, and they're no longer in that position, there's a lot of strain and stress put on the players, the coach, everybody else. So any decline whatsoever is going to be not what they're used to, because they're normally 1-2 in NA. So he talks about the history a little bit and then goes into what he provided as a coach. The major 3 points were replays, scrims, and to give the guys advice and help with their mental. He says in the beginning, he admits that the early stages, there wasn't much coach going on. He gave advice here and there and tried to keep the guys in a good place mentality wise and kept them in check there, which obviously showed with Justin on stage and the clutch performance. That stuff, a lot of it needs to be credited to the coach and keeping those guys level-headed. He focused primarily on the current series ahead of them and didn't really prep too much into the game's advance early on as a coach. As the scene has gotten more competitive with the circuit-based system and playing different teams all the time, things got a lot more competitive and it became a lot more involved, and said that the most recent season was probably the most effort he's ever put into coaching. Not saying he didn't put a ton of effort into the previous seasons or otherwise. Started taking more notes on pretty much every scrim, replay analysis in no times to prep for upcoming teams, providing that advice and insight that he got from the replay analysis, and then coming up with a structure or a system in place to help with consistency. That's what every team in the RLCS strives for. Consistent results that we can go to the World Championship and have a chance to compete when it comes down to how you plan on the day. He mentions that through all of this, Squishy, Garrett, and Justin are always on the top. So being not on the top is kind of an anomaly. And that kind of pressure and stuff and what that does for the team makes it difficult. States that he doesn't want to get too deep into what he did as coaching and doesn't want the video to get too long, like this one is becoming. On the other side of things too, we actually got some insight to this. I did a press conference with NRG and talked about those hardships and some of the things. If you guys haven't seen that press conference, I highly recommend it. But one of the things that's said, I'm pretty sure by Garrett, is that for a while they did rely heavily on their talent. They are 3 really notable players, 3 very talented players, and that has been enough to carry them for a long time. And because it is no longer enough, because the competition has leveled up significantly, trying to find ways and strategies and the stuff that Sizz is talking about, create a structure and a baseline to build off of, is some of the things that they are having to do for the first time. And that stuff does take time. A lot of people are calling for the heads of people, and they don't realize that you have habits that have been instilled in you for years. And trying to break those habits does take time, effort, and willingness to learn that stuff. Again, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that we do not know that goes on. I do appreciate Sizz providing some of the insight of the things that he is doing, because a lot of people just are left with a question mark. What do coaches do? We don't know. They don't talk about it. And people just base it on results only, even though there's so many more factors that go into it. Same with roster changes, everything else. So that all goes on, and then states and kind of transitions into how things came to be. He says that he found out from his general manager, Jamie. If you guys don't know Bike Age, it's at NRG Bike Age on Twitter. He asked him to hop on a call, and the GM ends up informing Sizz that you are being released as the head coach. And he wasn't exactly sure what to expect from this call, expecting it to kind of be a routine checkup or something like that. Not to put words in Sizz's mouth, but wasn't sure what to expect with the call. And he was informed that he's being released. His initial reaction is that he was hurt. And as the team has gotten closer and had more serious discussions and criticisms about play and trying to improve, he feels like the team was closer than ever, and that it kind of came out of the blue. This one I can hopefully provide a little bit of insight on. It's the same thing that I do with as a caster. And I know these aren't one-to-one in parallels, but it feels like a lot of times, you even saw John Sandman, one of the people that Sizz mentions he reached out to, which I'm kind of getting ahead of things, kind of asking about how these things came to be. From my perspective, and this could be different, it's tough because the players are very, very close with, again, you've built a relationship, you've put time and effort into this for 3 years, and you build kind of a relationship that transcends, you're my coach. It becomes more of a friendship. And the difficulty is when I work with companies or something like that, I want to show up as a commentator, do the best of ability, everything's sunshine and rainbows, even if I'm having frustrations with the production company or the staff I'm working with or whatever. I'm not going to air those grievances. As a public face, I'm going to be as friendly as possible. And then I'm going to let my management team and my agents express those frustrations, handle the pay, all that kind of stuff, so I can remove myself from that situation. I'm here to do a job to the best of my ability. I want that to be our working relationship, and that is it. The issue is those lines start to blur when you become you are with those players all day, every day. You become more friends, and it becomes a collective effort. And sometimes organizations, especially in like esports like League of Legends and all that kind of stuff, where the coaches and stuff have a lot more authority about roster changes and stuff like that, and you have a bigger roster, so one change isn't as impactful as it is in Rocket League with 3. A lot of times, players air grievances or frustrations to management. Management then goes to coach, or vice versa. Coach airs grievances to management. Management then pushes that down. That way, the relationship between coach and players stays good. It allows them to diffuse situations rather than things all being done internally. And maybe that is the approach. Because the players feel so much for Sizz as a coach, as well as a friend, it feels very weird approaching him directly and saying, hey, we're letting you go. So they let management handle it, and then otherwise. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's kind of my interpretation of it. But again, Sizz does provide some context to this and states that they have been more critical of each other. They are building relationship. It's getting better. And that's why it felt like he was kind of blindsided by it. He talked to Jamie, the manager, why, and he said it was best to talk to the players, to which he texted Garrett. Garrett calls him back and then states that, hey, we wanted to have a change. It's nothing to do with you specifically. Said your coaching was fine. Because Sizz was asking, from what it sounds like, he's trying to reflect on what could I have done better? What kind of things can I do and learn from this and self-improve, which I think is very commendable for Sizz, that rather than pushing blame and reflect despite being hurt, he is looking inward and saying, how do I get better? Which, again, a lot of respect from me for those types of things. He says that initially, he isn't going to lie, felt some resentment. But as time went on, he talked with some good friends. He mentions Rizzo, Fireburner, and John Sandman. As we talked, John Sandman did put out a tweet trying to ask for context. Not to go after everybody. He's just trying to have a better understanding. So hopefully me expressing kind of the way some of these things may go, that's kind of my perspective on it, on a kind of a positive way of seeing it. But it could also just be kids being kids. Not saying that's the case. He talks about how the players are kind of brought to this podium of excellence, and the perception that they have, players and the fans and stuff have of them is like they expect nothing but the best. That is kind of the expectation set with NRG. So to not be at that podium finish every single time, a lot of criticism comes from it. NRG fans are very, very supportive, but also quick to criticize at times, I've seen. So because they care. It's a very strong fan base. It's one of the oldest in North American RLCS, let alone RLCS altogether. The only two teams that beat them are G2 and technically SK Gaming from like OG days, but nobody really counts that. Talks about how he still loves the players, still loves the staff, considers Garrett's one of his best friends. Sunrise caught him off guard, and that Garrett said in the call that he wished they handled it better. This kind of brings the last part, and he talks about what he's going to do next, and there was two major things that come in mind. The first one says content, whether it's with NRG or not. It's something that he's never really put 100% focus into. He's always had to balance coaching or whatever it is and doing content, and had a good meeting with the NRG staff, Jamie, the GM, and Grady, who is he's the creator of the castle, which is like their content space, and he's the executive producer for their content. He emphasized that NRG doesn't want him to leave, that he's kind of the glue of the team, that he kind of bleeds NRG, which is true. Obviously, when you've been with someone for 3 years, tough to kind of not be associated to it for all the effort he's put in, and that he felt kind of refreshed that NRG still kind of had his back, that they still care about him, and that he personally wants to, what it sounds like, focus towards the content side of things, because he doesn't know what his limitations are. He's always had to hold himself back and not dedicate full-time to it, which I think is actually incredible. You see the personality that shines through, the amount of people that tune into the goofiness that they do when like Fireburner, Rizzo, and Sizz like do late night games together. All I look at is like, this is basically what F2 was, but they're actually good at the game. No offense to John, Wolf, and all those dudes, and Indy Mike. Obviously, incredible personalities, but I look at like Rizzo, Sizz, and Fire, and if those three make content together, good luck. Like internet's in trouble because people are going to be binging the heck out of those videos. So I personally think Sizz going into content is a phenomenal thing for his career. That's kind of the silver lining, is that sky's the limit for what he's going to be doing, and that personality as well as high level play is something very few in Rocket League get to do. So excited for that side. He also says that he doesn't want to keep any doors shut. He wants to open up all opportunities. So potential of coaching another team, and he's not leaning as hard towards it, but it's good to leave it as an option just because he doesn't want to close off any opportunities, and that he's interested to see what offers come through and what it could lead to. So that's kind of the silver lining in the last part of this video as I'm talking about, as we're hitting roughly the 20-minute mark, because I'm trying to provide as much context as I can. Again, if you want to see Sizz talk about this specifically, links and everything in the description down below. But yeah, it's a tough one. You're seeing this happen more and more, I think, with just stuff in general, people being let go with short notice or whatever it may be. And again, we don't always know the story. Like Sizz says at the very beginning of his video, there's two sides to every story. Whether we get that story from the players or not, probably not, I would assume. But I am appreciative that Sizz has spoken openly about it and provided his insight and his kind of thoughts on it as NRG tries to move forward. They're literally playing in the close qualifiers right now, trying to make it the main event and make top 16. So some pretty crazy stuff to kind of just self-reflect on. You know, my own personal reflection on some of this stuff is, it is tough, but you know, one door leads to another. There's a lot of opportunities, I think, for Sizz and his personality and what he's able to do. And I think sky's the limit. I think Sizz is going to have a very successful next phase of his career, whatever that entails, whether it be coach or content. Personally, selfishly, I'm hoping content, because I think there's going to be some awesome stuff that he puts out. But overall, I feel for the situation. It's never fun to, after putting 3 years into something you love and are passionate about, find out kind of out of the blue, from what it feels like, hey, you're being let go. So feel for him, feel for situations like Gregan and everybody else that's going on, but trying to be positive in the situation and try to provide context. So again, I highly recommend go support. Socials for Sizz and everything will be down below. Much love to him. And again, no hate towards any of the players or the staff or anything like that. Just trying to provide some context to it. So again, thank you to Sizz for keeping us open. Thank you for Shift for reporting and providing the narrative and keeping us up to date on everything. And thank you all for staying tuned and watching the video. If you guys enjoy the content, as always, like, subscribe, notifications. Here's on what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know in the comments down below. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace.